Just a word about UDC, Unique and Distinctive Collections. It's just worth reminding you that we're not talking only about what are labelled special collections. We are talking about any group of material maybe hidden in general collections, which is in some way unique or distinctive. It's also worth saying that the UDC strand of RLUK work is going to continue beyond the publication of the report in March, at least to the end of the current RLUK strategy in 2014. So the publication of the report will just be the start of the debate and not the end of one. And of course, it's the third, as you've heard, in a trilogy of reports, first hidden collections and then the OCLC survey. In the third report, the UDC report, there'll be about 15 recommendations, most of them directed at RLUK and RLUK libraries, though it's worth mentioning, of course, that non-RLUK libraries should find a report of direct interest to them too. The recommendations will cover nearly all the issues which have been covered by Elsa's study, including something which we didn't plan to cover at all originally, which is preservation. So the use in teaching and learning, management, preservation, collection management, metadata and resource discovery, digitisation of born digital, resources, both staff and space, and advocacy and impact. So there should be something for everybody. Most of the recommendations, in fact, are not to do with policy, so it won't be a matter of asking RLUK or anybody else to alter policies or to create policies. Most of them are connected with assembling examples of good practice, the kinds of things which you were talking about, Jackie, guidelines, best practice, case studies, and that's where we think the real promise is. So that's enough about where we're going. But I was originally asked to talk by David Prosser and give what he called a personal meditation. Meditation is not my usual mode of thought or discourse. It doesn't really come naturally. So I thought I'd turn to others who are more used to meditating and talking about meditation. So I turned to Marcus Aurelius, as you would. 2nd century Roman emperor, who I think was the first Western person to publish meditations. I must confess I was a bit disappointed. In book 8 of the Meditations, for example, you will find this. I quote, "A cucumber is bitter. Throw it away. There are brambles in the road. Turn aside from them. This is enough. Do not add. And why were such things made in the world?" Well, you probably agree with me, such thoughts are not really very helpful to practical librarians. Quite apart from their rather stoic and passive philosophy, where the recipe is a recipe for inaction. So I wasn't really any the wiser. The one thing I did take away from the experience was that scholars are mainly agreed that Marcus Aurelius didn't use PowerPoints, so I'm not going to use PowerPoint either. So these are personal reflections. Not all of them I will agree with, and not all of them my fellow project board members will agree with. And I intend to call a cucumber, if I think it is one. So I just have 3 things to say. One is about convincing people about the relevance and utility of what I'm going to call UDCs. Secondly, about growing staff, or maybe not growing staff, with the right skills to take UDCs in the future. And thirdly, I want to talk about born digital. All of those things have already been mentioned. So first of all, convincing people about the importance of UDCs. I think the report is going to equate this question, as Jackie's already said, with the formulation that we must align UGCs with the corporate mission, the parent institution. It's all about developing a set of arguments, as Jackie said. That, after all, is the key to retaining and the key to increasing resources in order to develop UGCs. resources because, despite what Jackie said, they're not always well funded, even in RLUK institutions. And another point, they tend to be labour intensive. The kinds of revolution that have overtaken general collections, relegation, aggregation, self-service, etc., haven't affected UDCs in the same way. Now, I suppose you might identify 4 levels of influence in increasing difficulty when it comes to convincing people about the importance of these things. I take it there are no problems at all with convincing those who are working directly with UDCs, curators, archivists, and so on. They're committed people, they're expert people, they have great strengths. Nowadays, there's less problem, I think, with library directors. It was Lorcan Dempsey, I'm sorry to raise your pet mark, Lorcan Dempsey opened my eyes many, many years ago about the future of academic libraries as collections, when he said that what I call common collections, common in the sense that we share them, but they're also not rare, they're not unique. There's increasingly little reason for local activity of an intensive nature. We share everything, and we try and make it as cost-effective as possible. What makes libraries nowadays different, distinctive, and attractive is really their special collections, their UDCs. So I think most people who run libraries and archives understand all that. It's more and more difficult with the third group, which is researchers and teachers. Spotting academic potential and then targeting individual departments, individual researchers isn't a science, it's a difficult art. And even when you've got, say, researchers to take advantage of your collections, ideally you need to be turning those researchers into your own advocates, and that's another challenge. The fourth group, though, is obviously the more difficult one, and that is VCs, research BBCs, and other hand drums. They may be wholly unsympathetic. When I was in another place, as they say, which had a succession of engineers as vice-chancellors, nothing worse, I could never persuade them that our special collections were a jewel in the crown. Or when I went to Lancaster University and found that they had enshrined their Ruskin collection in a wonderful new building at the very, not the centre, but the entrance of the campus, I just felt jealous. Nevertheless, of course, it should be possible to persuade VCs, PVCs, and so on that UDCs are capable of being jewels in the crown. I know there are certain circumstances in which that might be difficult. In a previous life, I was responsible for the collection of the British Union of Fascists. Maybe not many PVCs or VCs who wish the world to know about that. We do have some advantages, of course. There's a link with third mission, especially a third mission concerned with social and local community responsibilities. I'm not sure how powerful that is as a motivation nowadays for vice-chancellors. And more recently, of course, more powerfully, there's a REF impact, not just a REF impact, an impact with the HRC and other funders, which can help us too. So public engagement, for example, is a major piece of armour. Our own experience in an organisation not within HE, in National Library of Wales, suggests that more and more researchers in our own Welsh universities are turning to us in the National Library as a major holder of UDCs in order to improve their research chances, particularly with public engagement in mind. In this area, I think the report is going to make some recommendations, as I suggested, about toolkits, case studies, and so on. I hope that there may be something about the value of seeing UDC activities in this area as innovative, in other words, breaking new ground, and not as maybe people like VCs would see UDCs as being traditional, hidebound, really rather irrelevant pieces of the patrimony. We've talked about digitisation, so UDCs have got a track record there over some years now. But what about things like georeferencing, image recognition, augmented reality, big data, and so on and so forth? There's a case for saying that it's precisely in the areas of UDC that the most innovation in areas like that is taking place. In other words, UDCs are a nursery of vanguard. Much more so, maybe, at a local level at least, than whatever is happening to what I call common materials. Secondly, I want to talk about skills. And this links very much with the discussion that we had yesterday in Stephen Pinfield's group about the skills of future librarians and archivists. The report is likely to enunciate a general principle quite clearly, that while we need to retain the existing skills, many of them rare skills, for example in rare books or local knowledge, knowing collections intimately is a really powerful attribute of the UDC librarian. We do need to add to them generic skills. There was a lot of talk in the group yesterday about generic as opposed to professional or technical skills. Generic skills to do with particularly enhancing collections. And what I'm talking about is, for an example, skills to engage with prospective users, researchers. For example, do UDC librarians understand about digital humanities issues? Students, teaching. The public outside the walls of the institution. So skills like publicity, breaking down walls, knowledge of volunteering, for example. Project management, bearing in mind that funding very often is project-related, project-tied, discrete projects. Advocacy, persuasion, other communication skills, marketing, fundraising, and so on. Quite apart from general and specific digital skills to do with digitization, licensing, form digital, and so on. In other words, there's a vast array of skills needed by the UDC librarian of the future. Or is there? Most of you here will remember maybe in the 1970s there was a TV series called $6 Million Man, where I think an astronaut or something crashed to Earth. I can't remember the exact circumstances and needed to be rebuilt. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man. Well, is it possible to re-engineer the UDC librarian as a bionic man or woman? Is it realistic? Is it desirable to expect to be able to grow a paragon like that? What can be done by individual institutions and collectively, maybe through RLUK, to provide the opportunities for UDC librarians to acquire these additional skills? One of the recommendations is likely to be about trying to create a kind of inventory of possible skills. Another approach, though, is to co-opt experts from elsewhere within the institution, say marketers or fundraisers. I think that does presuppose, though, that UDCs are taken seriously by the institution as a whole if you're going to succeed in doing that. Another area of concern is succession planning and also career development of UDC librarians. Alison Cullingford noted the increasing trend towards looking after not just UDCs within libraries or archives, but whole heritage collections within individual institutions, where museums, archives, libraries and other cognate things are treated and managed together. Maybe that's a way forward. And maybe we need to be thinking much more in new ways, innovative ways of trying to think about managing and bringing new skills together. In the National Library, we now have somebody called a Professor of Digital Collections, somebody whose business is to link together actual digital collections, possible digital collections based on analog collections, and academic activity in institutions outside. As Jackie was saying, I think possibly one of the good outcomes of all this work will be a network, a group of UDC librarians. There are groups like the Rare Books Group and so on, but a group of UDC librarians is a network and share experience in all of these areas. The third thing I want to talk about is collecting, particularly born digital. We talked about hidden collections. It's great that that report has seen the light of day with its huge statistics, like 13 million volumes uncatalogued. It's important, I think, to understand that the Project Board and the UDC report will not necessarily be endorsing the recommendations in the hidden collections report. I don't know whether other members of the board share my scepticism, but without being a Dempseyan, I've had sufficient experience through things like RSLP not to be a retro zealot either. I'm a bit sceptical about the idea of creating a national register of hidden collections. Some collections are hidden for good reason. not that they're the British Union of fascists, but that they're not perceived to have a great deal of intrinsic interest in the past, now, or in the future. And is it not time for individual libraries, or collections of libraries, to look at a whole spectrum of options based on a hard-headed evaluation of what is the worth of those collections? A spectrum which ranges from positive prioritisation, in other words, really moving funds to describing and looking after neglected collections, to simplified descriptions, especially in archives. Benign neglect, why isn't benign neglect a good option? Transfer or repatriation, we've done quite a lot of that in the National Library. And even deaccessioning, where museums, I think, particularly national museums, have grasped the issues much quicker than we have. Growing UDCs in an interesting area. Collection development policies, I think, are probably well established in nearly all institutions. They have the effect, I think, of making collecting more restrictive in scope. But there's still, of course, scope for growth, and maybe even, dare I say, for inspired, unplanned, or even opportunistic growth. In other words, beyond your collection, formal collection development policy. But the real challenge, I think, is, as Jackie said, born digital. Born digital publications may or may not be taken care of, as Roland Keating was saying 2 days ago, by virtue of the fact that next year, with a bit of luck, we shall have legal deposit of electronic publications established in law. And the legal deposit libraries will be able, for the very first time, to collect comprehensively, in inverted commas, in that area. But born digital archives, unpublished material, is a different matter. For most institutions, it's likely to be a more hybrid approach. You'd be receiving or seeking collections which are both analogue and digital. In the National Library, we always refer to a type-site collection called Breathe Gore Archive. It's an archive of a performance company from the 1990s, which includes papers, photographs and slides, audio tapes, plans and drawings, production notes, scenarios, floppy disks, disk drive, side quest cartridges, whatever they are, MacBooks, and a lot more. And there are two problems with that. The scale can be large, forbidding, and the huge number of formats, most of them obsolescent, is really daunting. Also, of course, methodologies, new methodologies are needed. You need early intervention, for example, with authors' digital archives. You can't wait until they're dead. As Jackie said, only a minority of OCLC survey respondents actually have a strategy on managing born digital. And again, as Jackie said, most libraries report a lack of experience and lack of funding. I would repeat what Jackie said about the importance of kind of baby steps, and the reports by Rick O'Way, which are really excellent, very brief reports, mainly on physical digital media rather than, I think, than online ones. But they are really excellent reports, and I think if we can, as a group, draw people's attention to them, or indeed produce our own UK versions, I'm sure that would be a really excellent thing to do. But can we go further? Do we really need to organise ourselves more collectively in a different way in order to support institutions for whom born digital, dealing with born digital is a really, and is going to remain a really serious issue? Do we need specialist laboratories in the UK in some way? in the National Library, we have something called MAB Lab. I can't remember what that stands for, but it's essentially to do with trying to bring together expertise and equipment in order to deal with born digital material, which we've already got. And we're planning to gain enough money to establish a national conservation service for Wales, not a conservation centre, but a conservation service which will be open to other institutions to use, which will cover traditional conservation, but critically will also offer a service on digital preservation and curation. So I've run out of time and I'll stop there, and just to repeat what I said earlier, when the report does come out in March, it will have recommendations, but it will also be just the beginning of the debate about how RLUK and how individual libraries would like to take the agenda forward in the future. I thought I couldn't leave you though without returning to our dear friend Marcus Aurelius. And here's another quote. He was a man of very sunny disposition, as you'll see. Soon you will be ashes and bones, a mere name at most. And even that is just a sound, an echo. The things we want in life are empty, stale, and trivial. So much for meditation.